Protecting the nation's secrets? How much classified information out there is really secret and why? Hello, this is John Hnatio reporting for the Objective News Network. While all of us watch the Don and Joe show, there's only one thing the American people should be thinking about, and that's the virtuosity of our leaders. No matter which political party or persuasion you come from, we all have our fair share of failed leaders, and it seems the pickings today for an honest politician are mighty slim. The George Santos debacle is only one example. All of us are electing too many people with no moral compass. Failed leaders are characterized by a lot of things, but perhaps most pronounced is the striking lack of something called virtuosity. It's an essential principle from our Constitution. So let's take a little trip to Merriam-Webster.com using authentication to see what exactly it means. Among the many meanings of the word are the quality of doing what is right and morally excellent, among others. One essential principle of our Constitution reads, a free people cannot survive under a Republican Constitution unless they remain virtuous and morally strong. Benjamin Franklin once said, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have need of more masters. Close quote. Another essential principle of our Constitution is the most promising method of securing a virtuous people is to elect virtuous leaders. As Samuel Adams once said, neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberty and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupted. He therefore is the truest friend to the liberty of his country, who tries most to promote its virtue, and who will not suffer a man to be chosen into any office of power and trust who is not a wise and virtuous man. But the harsh truth is that the actions of our leaders are too frequently not wise, nor are they virtuous. They are, in fact, selfish, only to fight for personal power by getting everything they can. They do this over and over again, only to obtain and maintain the support of their political factions in efforts to get the biggest piece of the pie possible, even if they can't eat it all. It is these types of politicians on both sides that say, to hell with the bigger country, and the same Constitution they often proclaim they are supporting and defending, while doing exactly the opposite. The truth of the matter today is that virtuosity has been largely replaced with simple greed. As history has shown us, this lack of virtue and moral backbone can reach the highest levels of our republic, right up to the presidency of our own country, and so it seems every level in between. But in this series, I'm not going to talk about the arrogance, negligence, cover-up, and hypocrisy of the recent revelations that some of our leaders have yet again placed themselves above the same laws that they so readily apply to the rest of us, the little guys. There are already lots of good stories out there on the current Don and Joe show. Instead, we are going to dive a little deeper to ask some of the hard questions about the double standard applied to the enforcement of classification and some of the much darker things that the government actually uses classification for. In fact, the record is replete with cases of little people being summarily thrown into jails, sometimes for years for the crime of mishandling classified information. The record is also replete with cases of the higher-ups who do not go to jail for doing exactly the same thing, or even much, much worse. The fact that there is a dual system of justice in America when it comes to the protection of classified information, and so many other things, has never been more apparent than it is right now. But the justice system we have around us depends exclusively on the judgment of judges who know very little about the system of classification and how it is really used by the executive branch of our government to determine what is classified and what is not. So the question becomes, should the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Defense, the National Security Agency, the Department of Homeland Security, the Departments of States and Energy, be allowed to simply proclaim that something should be classified and then it is automatically classified? Especially when we already know that sometimes classification is used to cover up outright negligence, malfeasance, and much, much worse. Too often, letting the rest of the world know that you are not living up to the principles upon which the United States was founded, just like the case of Edward Snowden. You can end up with the big guys putting you into jail no matter what the big guys are knowingly doing to violate the very same Constitution that they, by the way, swore to protect and defend themselves. Let's take the case of James Clapper, the former head of the National Security Agency, who committed perjury before Congress and afterwards admitted to it during a media interview. While so many others have been thrown into jails for perjuring themselves, nothing ever happened with Clapper. Now, I wonder why. That brings us to the conclusion of part 1 of our story, Protecting the Nation's Secrets, how much classified information is really secret and why. Next time in part 2 of this story, we will share with you a real-world example of how things really work in the dark environments of government classification and how security too frequently becomes an obstacle to our own success as a democratic republic rather than an asset to protect the national security. It is what it is for January 15, 2023. This is John Hnatio reporting for the Objective News Network. Please subscribe and tell all of your friends about ONN. At ONN, we tell in depth the stories that no one else covers as we fight for you and your right as Americans to know the truth.